Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, we're continuing our discussion on the RadFem philosophy. So, what their goals are, what they advocate for, what their agenda is, what they're on about. And I have my notes here, and one of them is that the RadFems argue that division of labor is a tool of patriarchy to confine women to unpaid labor, which in turn limits their power and autonomy. They also argue that, women having to prioritize motherhood and homemaking over breadwinning is oppression. Okay? Now, I want you to think about something. Every chapter of your life, when you were a little tot, you were confined in a playpen. When you were even smaller, you were swaddled like a little burrito. You were confined in a car seat, then a stroller. Some moms carried you on their back. You were confined there. And as you leveled up, as time progressed, your confinements change, right? And your place, where you belong, where you mesh really well, where you want to be, changes. Now, what is interesting is that some women want to be paid by the government for cooking their kids' meals, for cleaning up after their own mess, and for watching their own kids. I have seen RadFems argue for a sort of universal basic income where stay-at-home moms are recognized financially for their contributions to raising children. A nanny is paid, but a mother is not paid. So it's interesting to think about. I mean, I understand this a little bit because, like, when I was going to my prenatal appointments, the doctor asked me if I worked, and we're talking, and she's like, "Okay, you don't work," and I'm like, "Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I'm doing work. I'm not paid for it." But if a nanny, and this is where that came in me in my brain, it's like, so if a nanny does what I do, it's work, but when I do it, it's not work. That's a little insulting, right? So if a stranger does what I do, it has a sort of economic and value recognition. But when I do it, it's like, oh, you don't work. So, but see, the word work has this sort of very slimy, sticky, dual nature, doesn't it? Because, yeah, I'm not going to a physical location, which is traditionally, in natural language, a 9-to-5 work. But I'm not idle. I'm not stagnant at home. There's tons to be done. And if I were not to do it, then I had to pay someone to do it. A maid, a chef, or a nanny. So I'm doing all three of those. And what? That's my job as a mom. A mom does work. I think it's fascinating how there's this sort of split between the stereotypes of what a stay-at-home mom does. Now, my grandma was a stay-at-home mom her entire life, and a stay-at-home grandma, and she didn't really do much. So that she was a negative stereotype. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, didn't have a job at that time when I was in high school, and we lived in a one-bedroom place in Philly. She wasn't a very good cook. She didn't bother to learn how to cook, and I had a job at a pizzeria and a place called Crown Fried Chicken, and I would buy my own food on the outside, a lot of Chinese food and hoagies and Philly cheesesteaks. So I fed myself. And she was not even up for taking me to school. She said I had to learn to be independent. I'd ride what they call the L in Philadelphia. And I would take it to school and then come home by myself. So my mom was really not into taking me places and felt that I had to do it, which was, in Philadelphia, that's quite dangerous. Philly's way more dangerous now. Thank Allah we got the hell out of there. But she wasn't what you would call a homemaker. Not in the least. Neither was my grandma. I, however, changed that and the activities I do with my children, the variety is very vast, and even the conversations we have are very deep, and it's quite different. I have made a home, I think, inshallah. Not just a place you sleep, but a home. That's why it's called homemaking. You make the home, because home is where the heart is, right? I don't want the government to pay me for taking care of my kids, but it would be cool if there was a sort of credit system where when tax season comes along, you get a massive tax credit for having a woman who stays home. But the thing is, you'd have to watch out for women who abuse that system, where they're literally the worst neglectful moms, but they're getting a check cut, so they don't care. I think if you have some sort of, this may creep some people out, but in government investigation, they check if your home is clean, they look at your fridge, they interview your children on the cooking you do, like if you're actually taking care of them, like a performance review. Because if a nanny, if she has a public website, she's going to have reviews, she's going to have references before you hire her. So maybe before you get a check cut from the government, there's some type of foolproof way where there's surprise pop-ups where they can check on you to see if the children are actually being well cared for, being showered, have clean sheets and don't have lice, and they're being tended for. Their teeth are brushed, right? That you're actually doing your job, right? You'd have to qualify an active stay-at-home mom versus someone who's just smoking blunts and watching Real Housewives of Atlanta, or she's drinking Chardonnay from a box and smoking cigs on the patio, and her kids are running around in their diapers being wild. Okay, so yeah, you'd have to really have a way of making sure the right women get rewarded for raising good citizens for the nation, right? If you wanted to have that paid labor talk. But when you wash dishes, the government don't need to pay you for that. You clean your toilet that you poop in, the government don't need to pay you for that. But when you make someone else clean up your own poop and wash your dishes, then yes, you should pay someone and compensate them because they're cleaning up after you. You cleaning up after yourself is called responsibility and common decency, right? If I go have a picnic with my children, I don't leave the garbage there. I pick it up and put it away. When I go to a restaurant, though, the busser gets paid to clean up, and he gets a percentage of the tips to clean up the plates we leave behind. But there are some places where you have to take your own tray, where there isn't a busser, and clean up your mess. And terrible people don't do that. They just leave the mess on the table for the next customer to have to remove. You see the difference here? So it's important to recognize that if you're a woman and you're like, sorry, to cook for you, to cook for the children, like she's talking to her husband, I need to be paid. Now, there is this sort of allowances that men who have means can give to their women, but I notice that the women who get an allowance, who talk about getting them, they're often gold diggers who don't cook and clean and have nannies and maids already, but they get an allowance even though they're not doing traditional gender role activities. This doesn't make sense to me. So, I don't think that, because they think these RadFems in purely economic terms. You have to remember, we have to sacrifice for our children. They're gonna grow up real fast, and you can do something for someone without expecting instant gratification of the return on your investment, right? So, okay, I take care of my kids well, they'll take care of me in my old age, inshallah. If I make it to my old age, there's so many variables where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take away our plans. But it's interesting how, when I have talked to RadFems about children should take care of their parents and not put them in an old folks home, they say, how selfish of you to expect your kids to take care of you in your old age. You're selfish and you're narcissistic. And it's like, hold up. So you want to be paid to cook to clean up after yourself, to watch your own kids from the government, taxpayer money, okay? So you want to take away from the GDP and siphon it off into that area for you to take care of your own family. But it's selfish for me to think that my kid shouldn't abandon me in an old folks home to rot later on in life. Reciprocation doesn't come into the RadFem mind. So in one regard, they're deeply selfish. And in the next regard, they want the taxpayer to foot the bill. I think in their mind, once the money is put on motherhood, an economic stamp is put on it, then it'll become more legitimized and more respected. Because it's almost as if they're saying people only respect what makes money. So if a stay-at-home mom don't make no money, then she's not respectable. So what this tells me is that, as Muslims, we need to talk about the importance of stay-at-home mom, present moms, and not shame simple moms. I don't see Muslims at all shaming mothers in poverty, because we have plenty of hadiths that talk about helping the poor and helping the widows, right? And helping the needy. We're encouraged to give zakah and sadaqah. We have to, right? So what are you talking about? And the akika, when your baby's born, you sacrifice an animal, get a meat to the poor. We're always having that type of charitable consciousness, and by doing charitable acts towards the needy, we get some parts of our sins forgiven. So who are we to really judge that someone needs a little leg up, right? I think definitely Muslims recognize the importance of mothers. That hadith that talks about paradise is through the feet of the mother, and you think about how much a mother suffers to bring you into this world and to maintain you, and how they brought you up when you were small. Plenty of Muslims understand that. But when you have a more atheistic creed or an occultic creed that inverts morality, that so many RadFems are a part of with the Wiccans and all their strange little cults, you begin to see that, they don't really have the same view of self-sacrifice as us. So remember, the hadith that talks about if a woman dies and her husband is pleased with her, she can enter paradise through any door that she likes. So clearly that shows that a good wife will be compensated, and we know as Muslims that Allah is swift in accounting, and you will face no injustice. So every little act of kindness and goodness you do towards your family, you're going to be rewarded for that. So sure, you may not be getting, $5,000 a month just for cooking and cleaning, but you're maintaining a sanitary, safe nest for your children to grow up in, which is important for their adult life later on when they look back on it with nostalgia. Okay, and they tell stories to their kids about how good they had it, and this will motivate the generations, because in order to fix generational dysfunction, you got to start now in the now, right? So if you want to break the cycle of dysfunction within your family, you can't continue it. That means don't have a dirty home. Don't just feed them fast food every day. Actually cook. Actually do things for your kids. But you can see some women resent their family, and they resent their kids, and they resent their own femaleness. They resent their own body. So there's this disconnect where they want to be able just to have a kid and just hand them off to someone and then gallivant about. And this is very absurd. This really rejects femininity, I'd argue. It rejects that part of our essence as women that wants to protect and nurture our kids, And so if you think about it, them not wanting you to prioritize motherhood and prioritize homemaking and focus on breadwinning shows you they have more of an economic goal. So the worship of money. I really do think that a lot of RadFems worship money more than they value spending time with their kids. To them, it seems that their kid is something to put on the back burner, and they have a very narrow sense of time. There's going to be time when you get old, someone's going to need to take care of you without expecting a lot in return, right? We have to have moments where we help people just for doing a good deed, right? It's not because you expect to be paid. In a world, if we lived in a world where you always had to be paid for doing every single action, it'd be a pretty cutthroat dog-eat-dog world. Because there's not that much money, and so many people are in poverty, and kindness shouldn't come with a price tag. But if you notice, the RadFems are like, no. If you want us to be at home cooking and cleaning, you're oppressing us. It's a tool of patriarchy to confine us here. We want to be out and about, traveling the world, and relaxing in luxury, living a high life. We want to be able to go out. But I do understand that some women are trapped financially and can't leave because they ain't got no money, so they're with a bad person. You know, so this then goes into being able to have intact families so that if you are oppressed, you can go to your dad, your brother, your uncle, your aunts, and you can leave that relationship and not be trapped. But that also talks about keeping families intact, keeping kinship, and then having healthy families that can support each other. But I would argue it is very noble to prioritize motherhood over careerism. And that feeling as a mom when you're like, no, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and someone, if someone gives you a look like, oh, what a loser. Inside, you're like, man, my kids are my world. And I know that's a cliche phrase. It really is, because it's been used by so many weird women on dating apps. My kids are my world. But it is true, because for me, I think about, are they safe? Are they clean? Are they fed? Are they happy? What do we need to correct? They are my main focus. Even when I would be at work, my brain would be distracted. I would be missing my children, and it was very difficult for me to try to balance both of that. And coming home and being more short-tempered, it just didn't work. And so, a lot of women need advice and help on how to distract their mind sometimes and not get cabin fever when they're a stay-at-home mom, and I've made plenty of videos on that. Just check out my motherhood playlist. But I've spent quite some time helping women to become comfortable and assimilated to stay-at-home mom life, and each person within their city, their country, will have access to different features of their surroundings that will help them to cope and love and adore being a stay-at-home mom. So, again, let the man focus on breadwinning. And they say, oh, well, how can a man provide, and when you need 2 incomes? Make your man work 3-4 jobs. He can work 3 jobs and have 2 side hustles. Make the man work. Make him get the cash and money, and you focus on your children. And then when they're grown, you can go out there and earn some of that bread and butter that you want. So, that's what I'd say. Let me know what you think. The division of labor being a tool of patriarchy to confine women, you can see that there's a truth nugget there, right? Like, you can see where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of women online now are complaining about having to work. So you see a shift, right? And I find that to be quite interesting. Very interesting.